how did you get to the Nobel Prize Committee? Is it how is the selection
I can
done?
tell about, yeah, okay. I can tell all about I can tell that's not secret. The procedures, how you enter, all about the way the Nobel Committee, Nobel Assembly, how they are working. So that I can tell now if you wish. Is that a good idea?
Yeah,
yep.
It's a great idea.
Okay, so we start with the Don Thomas. So Don Thomas, as you all know, he got the Nobel Prize together with Joseph Murray in 1990. And the reason that the Nobel Committee officially has presented is that he got it because he made cell transplantation to a clinical applicable method. And Joseph Murray, he made other organ transplantation in the same way. So that was why it was thought by the committee that to have these two was an excellent idea, and they got it together. So there was no room for having, that could have been one more person involved, because the maximum number of people that can get the Nobel Prize at 1 year are 3. So therefore, it was not possible to have one more player in organ transplantation or one more player in cell transplantation. So although I cannot tell about how we reason, I can just say that it ended up, as everybody knows, that one person got it for organ transplantation, one for cell transplantation, and the prize was divided. So one got half, and the other got half of the prize. And the prize was then around, it was 10 million crowns, and 10 million crowns is somewhat less than $1 million. So that's about how big it is. Now the procedure. So I'll come now to the procedure. So the Nobel Assembly was established according to Alfred Nobel's testimony. He said that the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, as it is named, should be given by the Karolinska Institute. So the Karolinska Institute had to create the body at that time, that was in the early 1900s, a body that could execute his will. So that was how they formed the Nobel Assembly. It's called the Nobel Assembly, not the committee. They call it the Nobel Assembly. And the Nobel Assembly was made up by all professors in medicine at the Karolinska Institute, because at that time there were very few, you know. There were much less than 50. I don't know exactly how many there were in the beginning, but what was some 10 to 20 people. But then, of course, you know, with the professorship that, as I think in most other countries, you get more and more professors. And I would say today, be a little critical, it's a little too easy now to be professor at the Karolinska Institute. And when I became professor, I was one of the last who was really going through the whole process of applications and so forth. But just before the time that I entered the assembly, they changed the rules. So the assembly should be no more than 50 professors at the Karolinska Institute. So then there had to be an election procedure. And the election procedure was such that the assembly itself, those who were professors at that time, they elected a new professor, but the number should never be more than 50 in the assembly. So this was now the body that decided about the Nobel Prize. And everything was made by secret voting. So you didn't know how the other person, the other professor at your side was voting. It was secret, and it was done by small labels. You know, you wrote the name and then you cast your ballot. But of course, to have an assembly without specialists was not enough. So very early, the assembly created the Nobel Committee. And the reason was that the Nobel Committee should be like it is in many countries, a government and a parliament. And the assembly was like the parliament to take the decision, while the Nobel Committee became the governmental body. They made all the research about the nominees, and they also presented to the assembly their proposal. Okay. So eventually, the committee became the important body. It was very rare that the assembly would go against the committee. So as assembly then, by secret voting, elected 5 people to create the Nobel Committee, those who were going to work with the prize. They worked in the beginning of the spring until the October, when the prize was presented on the candidates. So how about these 5 people? They among themselves suggested a chairman, and then the assembly decided about the chairman that the committee wanted to have as a chairman. So 5 people was still very few. So every year, the committee suggests another 10 people to be associated with the committee. So they will be members for a year. And then these 15 people then work with the prize for that particular year. So how do they then get the nominees? Well, there is a procedure that you get invited. And who is invited? Well, by the will of Alfred Nobel, all professors in medicine or physiology in Swedish, Norwegian universities, actually it became eventually the Nordic universities, are allowed to nominate Nobel Prize candidate for the prize in physiology or medicine. But of course, this was not enough. So eventually, the committee developed a much broader way of being able to nominate. So they decided to invite from all countries, I would say, important universities to choose candidates that they wanted to have the Nobel Prize. So that means that most important universities, particularly in the United States and Europe, but also in China, Japan, and all over the world, they get invitations. And usually these invitations go to the deans or the chairman of the university. So I would say these places are not very effective, and frequently the invitations do not go down to those who really know about the candidates. So now there is another body that could propose, and that is previous Nobel laureates in medicine or in physiology. And in fact, I would say those are the most efficient people to propose candidates. It's very frequently previous Nobel laureates that propose other laureates for the particular year that you are working on. So that is, the previous candidates, they are very knowledgeable. I must say, I've read many of their proposals, and they are excellent, you know. And I would say most of the time when you give out the prize, you have had proposals for these persons by previous laureates. I cannot tell how many because I'm not allowed to do that. And for this year, I cannot tell who has done the proposal. But then, of course,
for how long are you a member of the assembly or the committee?
Yes, that's a good question. So in the assembly, the assembly. There you sit until you retire. So as soon as you are elected, you sit until you're retired. Then the rules for the committee has actually varied a little over the years. But when I was there, it was 3 + 3 years. You could be, but you had to be re-elected for the next 3 years. So it was maximum 6 years. But if you could have been elected to be an associate for 1 year, that was not counted. So in fact, I was sitting there for 10 years. So in the assembly, I was there. I entered the assembly and the committee at the same time, and then I was sitting until retired in both. But because I was associated in the beginning, and for that, all those years until I was a permanent member or a member for 3-year periods, it could add up. So for that reason, I was there for 10 years. So I was there from 1987 until 1997 when I formally retired. So that's how you can prepare the whole thing. Then, of course, we are retired members are in a way involved throughout their lives because they are invited to certain reunions with the present committee in the past and so forth. So I still have connections with the committee, but I'm not a formal person to give advice or select. Sometimes I can propose, but so that is still possible. But I'm not a member anymore. When you retire, you're not a formal member of the Nobel Committee nor of the Assembly, and you have to go. So of course, it's good to have a rotating system, so you don't sit there forever. Before, the secretary, who is very powerful, the secretary for both the Assembly and the Committee is the same secretary. He is very powerful because he keeps all the threads, And earlier, he could sit forever, but that was changed. So he can sit for 2 times 6 years, so that is 12 years. And I don't think it's changed now recently. But there are some changes that has gone on long after I left, and that is that there are more invitations to nominate. And that means that the number of nominations earlier was around 200 or 250 candidates, while now it has gone up to several hundred. So it's more difficult today to do the job. Then how is the job going on? That's also, I think, an interesting question. And it's going on that when you get all these nominees, and at my time it was around 200, maybe 250. Well, it turns out that maybe 50% or even more have been nominated before. So you have to be nominated. You have to be nominated for the particular year that you get the prize. You cannot get the prize if you are not nominated that year. You cannot be nominated because you were nominated the year before. So if you want to nominate for the prize, you have to do it repeatedly. So certain of those who nominated and were very anxious to have that particular person get the prize, they nominated years over and over again. And how did we handle that in the committee? Well, actually, in the beginning of the year, in February, when all the nominations have entered, the committee goes through all these nominations. And then you find that more than half of them have been nominated before. So there are always made a short note on each. The usual way is to, if you are certain this person should not have the prize, there are many nominations that are really not very good. You made what's called a protocol note, and that could be 10 lines or something like that, which ends up not a person for the prize. And maybe half of these persons that have been nominated already had a protocol note, and then you just went through and said, okay, this person is not actual, this person is not actual for the prize. So otherwise it would be hopeless with 250 nominations. So eventually, if there's a new one which the committee thinks we should work on, then they make a longer note. They say this is a preliminary investigation. Some of the committee members will be assigned to make a kind of short investigation if this person could be a candidate that really could get the prize. Then you have been a little more important in this way, and there's a bigger chance for you, you know. And then eventually there are nominees, those who have been nominated, that the committee thinks are really interesting for maybe a prize. And you select maybe 10, 15 every year to make what's called a special investigation. And that is assigned to, could be a member of the committee, but it could also be outside people that you invite to make an investigation about the person that has been nominated. And that person has to have secrecy, of course, agreements with the committee. So if you are an outsider that making special investigation, you really promise not to talk about it with anybody. You have to do your investigation in secret. You can, of course, use all possible channels, but you're not allowed to tell that you're doing it for the Nobel Committee or anything that would reveal that you work with this person.
And what is the investigation like? Can you talk about that? What?
Yeah, that is usually it is a 10-page or so investigation about the field, about the persons that have been involved in the field, attempt to sort out who has done what, and attempt to find out who was the brain for really coming to the result that they have come to. So it's a very deep investigation that's done. And most of the time, when these investigations come to the committee, which is done long before the decision. So if we start in February, these should be in more or less in the summer or at least in the beginning of the fall. So it's possible then to make another one, another special investigation by another person, because we want to have more views. And I would say that most of the time when you make a special investigation, the person or persons that are then investigated, they will not get the prize that year, because most of the time the Nobel Committee want to have more special investigations. And that means that the next year, most of the time these persons are nominated the following year as well. And if not, the Nobel Committee can propose themselves. So they can also bring up these people again and make new investigations. So most of the time, special investigations have been made several times before you eventually have a chance to get the prize. So how is then, when these special investigations have been made, how do you come to a decision? Well, the assembly and the committee, they have joint meeting repeatedly. So as soon as the committee has made, let's say 10 investigations, special investigations, there is a meeting with the Nobel Assembly. The chairman or somebody else has to present all the results to the assembly, and they test with the assembly. What do you think in the assembly? Have you any views? And maybe somebody bring up something that is of interest, or they don't do too much. They listen, and they might say in the assembly, okay, go ahead and make another investigation, or well, your proposal seems to be relatively good. You have here 5 candidates, 10 candidates in different fields. So try to make a little more specific what you think is the most hot type of group or person that should have the prize. And the committee goes back. They have listened to the assembly. They do some more job. And then there is another meeting. And then at the next last meeting in the fall of the year when the prize is giving, usually the committee has 1 or 2 groups to present to the assembly, but they should have a proposal for the one that they think is the best one. So most of the time they propose this group should have it this year. And if the assembly doesn't oppose to this, there are no one that tells, no, that's impossible, or this should be the other group, or something like that, then the committee goes back. They think they have made a good job, and at the day when they are going to present the winners, they think that the assembly will say yes. They're pretty sure about that, but you never know, so it's a little tricky. So on the other day, now the last Monday, when the decision was taken, I can presume, I don't know now this, that there were perhaps 1 proposal in the morning to the assembly from the committee. And I assume they then said yes to that. Now, if the committee didn't have a clear proposal, they must have that, because if they have 2, the assembly has to choose. And it's presented at 11:30 the same day, so you don't have too much time. So actually, the committee must be very sure that in the earlier joint meetings, they have got a clear view of the assembly that they will say yes to their proposal. And most of the time, they have only 1 proposal for 1 group. Otherwise, it's too tricky. I have experienced a 2 proposal once, and I can tell you it was very tricky, but I will not tell about that. So that's how it can go. Most of the time, there's no problems. There is a joint view from the committee and the assembly suggests the proposal, and at 11:30 it's presented to the press and everything. And actually, before they present it to the press, the secretary tried to call up those who have got the prize, before the media goes out with it. So, and that was what happened on the last Monday, that the nominated, those who got the prize were called up, and I think they didn't manage to reach all 3, because there were 3 for the hepatitis C virus, and eventually they always get very shocked by having got the prize. I didn't know about it most of the time, or so, but sometimes it happens that the one who has got the prize says, oh, well, yes, I deserve it. I think I was the right one. So it varies,
How was it in 1990? Was Thomas
well,
right?
Don got it in the middle of the night because because of the time lag. In the morning, it's not yet morning in the United States, and he woke up and he was very happy about the prize. He was very surprised. Very surprised. So that was done, but he was very happy, of course, not to tell about his wife that Dottie, Dottie was very happy, very happy. So that was how it was when he got the prize.
And in 1990, was there only 1 suggestion from the committee which summarized the
that I'm not allowed to tell.
Okay.
That is a secret, because that I cannot tell. So that will not be allowed, because that would be too much. Then I enter how the committee reasoned in the specific case, and that I am not allowed to do. So I can only say that when Thomas got the prize, it was a prize, and I think it was a very good prize. So that's how far I can come. Otherwise, they would be very angry in the Nobel Assembly committee.
we don't want that.
No.
How can you talk a little bit of your experience in 1990, how it went? Have you been surprised, or was it clearly that the Nobel Prize eventually came to be received by transplanters, or?
I think it was very well taken by transplanters. Of course, I was myself in the committee at that time, so I cannot talk about my own reactions or what I did or so forth. In fact, I think I was already the vice chairman, because I was vice chairman for more than 3 years, and then I was a chairman for 1 year in the committee. So it was during my time, so therefore I cannot talk about my own role at all. I can only say that Don came because you get in October you decide about the prize, but then the prize is given out at the 10th of December when it's always is done, and Don came with Dottie, in December, and he came a little earlier than it starts, because he has to give a lecture for the Nobel Assembly and the Nobel Committee. In fact, for all people at the Karolinska Institute. So it's an open lecture, and Don gave a very good open lecture. It's written in a series of books where he talks about himself. He talks about his prize and how he came to the prize. So there you can, in fact, read the whole history as he sees it. And I think Don was very happy and very surprised. He didn't think that you could get a Nobel Prize for having made a clinical method. He had seen all these prizes that could pinpoint a discovery. And that is more difficult in Don's case. It's more like a procedure that eventually will be clinically applicable, and that's very unusual in the history of the Nobel Prizes in physiology of medicine. So he was very surprised, but very happy. And then he came. He gave his lecture. It was a very good lecture, although he was relatively old at that time, and it was a very good lecture. And then there was a big festivities in the city hall and in the concert hall, first at the concert hall and then at the city hall. So you are moved from one place to the other for the dinner, while the ceremony is in the concert hall in Stockholm. So a very wonderful thing. And then we trained before. So because I was presenting to the public Don's discoveries as well as Joseph Murray's in the concert hall where the king is present and all the important persons. So you train before how you walk, how you go, how you do. And Don, he's not that kind of person that likes that very much. And there is the secretary of the whole Nobel organization. It's called the Nobel Foundation. He was like a general, something like that, on how we would go there. And Don, he had to do all this, And then he said, why couldn't I go with Dottie? And, he was going to go with me, so he wasn't allowed to go with Dottie. And he said, I understand. And then when the ceremony then eventually the next day, Dottie was sitting on the front line, close to the princess and all of those. And she was very happy when Don eventually got the prize. So that was a nice ceremony that Don, I think, liked very much.
Yeah, actually, the lecture can be found as a video on the Nobel
Yeah.
Prize website, and
Yeah, that's right.
I would encourage everybody to
Yes,
watch
that's right.
that. That's quite
Yeah.
quite interesting, especially from our time when we see that there's only like one Kaplan-Meier curve, and because now you see one slide with I don't know, dozens of curves and tables, and
Right.
everything need to be put on one slide. And this lecture was in comparison to the presentations now really relaxing, calm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was very good. I remember that lecture. And of course, the Nobel, it's a Nobel Foundation, has worked very much with these sites that you can see the video and all that. And I think that's great. In fact, they are lagging behind a lot, unfortunately. So you know, they have to now also talk about who is nominating, which persons are nominating. But they have come, I think they have coming to the 60s or something like that. They are not allowed to come, it must be 50 years, you know, of secrecy. So now they can work on 1970, but they are in the 1950s or something like that. So they are lagging behind. So, for example, you cannot yet see there who nominated Don Thomas. You will eventually be able to do that, but now you cannot do that because it's too early. So, but that's a very good. They are doing otherwise they are doing this Nobel Foundation are doing very well in this video. I think these sites that you can enter and look at.
And what do you think was your point of view, or what was the standing of bone marrow transplant in the 1990s? So was it, from your point of view, what in just to give a quick, like what was it to be a transplanter and in 1990 when the Nobel Prize was given to?
I would say that in 1990, that was on the top of the bone marrow transplantation. You know, I'm of course thinking a lot on myeloma that's very interesting because at that time all these new drugs was not yet there. So bone marrow transplant, allogeneic bone marrow transplant was extremely important. I mean, in 1990, autologous was also on the way, and for other disorders as well, for leukemia and so forth, it was extremely important. You cured people that you hadn't been able to cure before. I'm just taking the example of chronic myelocytic leukemia because, I mean, that was fabulous to see these patients that all had died before. Now they were cured. In fact, at the at the meeting at the Karolinska Institute only a couple of years ago, a patient came up to me, and I didn't remember the patient, of course, because we had many, and he said, Professor Gahrton, I was one of those with chronic myelocytic leukemia that I got a transplant, and I have been very well throughout. You know, this was now 30 years ago or something like that, or even more. And those patients are there. And before, you had never seen a patient with chronic myelocytic leukemia cured. So it's really, in 1990, we were on the top, I think, of stem cell and bone marrow transplantation. Of course, we are doing perhaps more now because it is more worldwide and so forth. But there is always debate in many, not the least myeloma, about the use, as you know, about allogeneic transplantation. Not many are doing it anymore. And I think in many other disorders, it will probably decline. Some disorders, it will increase probably. But the decline is coming with the new drugs that are doing very well. And of course you can, if we now think about CAR T and CAR NK might come, that is, of course, you can call it a type of transplantation, but that's not actually stem cell transplantation. It's utilizing an immune mechanism to kill the cancer. So I don't know. We will see how it develops. But in 1990, I think bone marrow transplantation was the method now to cure a lot of people, with particularly hematologic disorders, of course.
Okay. So
maybe that was why the prize went through. I am not sure,
yeah.
But that could be one of the reasons. I'm not talking about that, but of course, that was very much, people accepted this prize very positively, very positively. So there have been other prizes that have been less accepted, I can tell you.